Welcome to the Earthworks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
All right. Welcome, Stephen. Thank you so much for getting on here, the Earthworks podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jack. I look forward to it.
Yeah, man. And I appreciate you being very patient. I know that we had this scheduled once before. I had to cancel, and then we got on. We troubleshoot some audio visual stuff, but you stuck through it, man. And I'm excited to have this chat.
Yeah, I'm excited too.
All right. So Stephen, I've been working with you for a number of years, and I'm thinking back as to when we met. I believe you were working at Kinloch when we met. And I remember being at a Mid-Atlantic room, at the GIS, how they host the association rooms. I remember being in the Mid-Atlantic room and hanging out on the balcony. And I guess, was that maybe San Diego, or do you remember that we were hanging out on the balcony?
Yeah, I think it was San Diego. Probably 2015 or so.
Yes, and you were still at Kinloch.
Yeah, so I was an assistant superintendent at Kinloch, and they'd send us every other year or so to kind of rotate who was there, and fortunate enough to go a few times while working there. And
I think Corey Wesselman was with you at that point.
Yeah, I think Corey might have left a little bit before I got there, so probably close, similar time frames, but I think he moved along.
Okay.
Around that time. So
excellent, man. Well, so let us all know, how did you get into this crazy business that we all do together?
So the long story, try to keep it short. Grew up playing golf. So grew up, really into golf, played a lot of golf growing up, where I lived.
Where was that?
Lake Monticello, about 20 miles east of Charlottesville, Virginia.
Oh, beautiful. Off of 64 there. And yeah, real nice country.
So, continued to play golf, throughout high school, went to college originally at JMU, James Madison University, no real idea what I wanted to do. But summers I would come home, I'd work golf course jobs, cart boy, stuff like that.
And so what course was that at?
So I worked at a few, but, I was working at Spring Creek Golf Club.
I kind of thought you were going to say Spring Creek.
So working there as a cart boy, enjoying my summers, having, doing things that a 20-year-old, 19-year-old would do.
Zero responsibility.
Yeah. So I actually got to know the superintendent there really well. Brian Vincel was his name.
Of course. Familiar to many of the Earthworks podcast listeners.
Yeah, so we created a relationship, played golf a couple of times. I was still a cart boy, but I'd see him around and I'd tell him, hey, if you ever need a hand with anything, let me know. And I don't think he really took me serious. And I told him, I'm going to help you guys. I think we had like some sort of mini tour event, and so he took me around and had me assist with some golf course setup and stuff like that. And, at that time I was a sport and recreation management major at JMU, not really knowing exactly what I wanted to do with it. And I had to do an internship. So he convinced me the next summer to come work on the golf course. And, similar to a lot of people, really fell in love with the mornings, the activity, the setup of it. But what I really loved about it was the there's always stuff to do. You never, we were always doing stuff. It never stopped. You never got bored. And that's when I really took a passion for it, was working there. And I he had a couple of really, really good assistants that were there, and they helped me along. So at that time I understood golf really, really well, but I had no idea about growing grass, growing turf.
What a special perspective that you had, though, being a high quality player, like being a top quality player, to then come into the grass growing world.
Yeah. So, back then I could play a little bit. Right now it's not as good as it used to be. But besides that fact, I just really, really enjoyed it. I mean, I just loved being out there. I mean, I started hand watering greens and cutting cups were kind of the first things they got me on. So I really liked the setup side of things. And then, I actually managed 9 holes, the moisture on the greens. On my weekend on, I would have, the front 9 greens, on my weekend on. Then during the week, it was more hand watering fairways or whatever else needed to be done. But, took a passion to it, really liked the setup side, got my first introduction to moisture management. And from there, I had to figure out a little bit more, what I was going to do with my life. So Brian said, go work for my buddy Trevor Hedgepath at the Federal Club. He said, I think it'll be a good opportunity for you. So kind of, another turf grass internship is how it was set up without, I didn't have a turf degree.
Yes.
So I go in there, Trevor, similar thing still, with my little bit of experience at Spring Creek, I could hand water and cut cups, but I still didn't know how to grow grass, or not even close to it. But come in, worked really hard. I'm there for about 2 weeks and they're supposed to hire a second assistant. And the guy ended up not coming. He ended up backing out. So Trevor says to me, he's like, hey, work really hard this summer and, you have a job. So,
Wow.
so, things fell into place. It's a quick avenue for not having a turf degree. But that being said, I did work really hard in my golf knowledge, a little bit different perspective helped. And, on top of that, I felt like I was pretty intelligent with, some of the basics and understanding of how to calibrate spreaders. And then, just responsibilities. I think I was pretty reliable. So, spent some time there, which, we talked about this a little bit, but both Trevor and Brian were Kinlock guys.
Yes, of course. Of course. Now, so I guess Pete Went was still at Kinlock when you were at the Federal Club with Trevor. But tell me now how you got to Kinlock.
So 2014, I think it was, January or so, 2014, Pete transitioned to the DC area, went to Woodmont, and then Trevor ended up landing the job, 10 miles down the road at Kinlock.
Yes.
So, shortly after, I followed him over to Kinlock. At that time, I was at Federal Club for about 2.5 years. And I'm still getting by on this. I'm going to work harder than everyone else and, just try to learn as much as I can philosophy, but still don't have a turf degree at this point.
Okay.
So I followed Trevor over to Kinlock.
Now I know Kinlock is nothing but beautiful bent grass. Remind me, is the Federal Club a bent grass golf course as well?
Yes, Federal Club, tees, fairways, greens, bent grass.
Yep. Okay. So continue. You're now at Kinlock. You're working again with Trevor. He's the super at Kinlock, and he still is. And but you still don't have a turf degree. Did that come?
Yeah. So I think I was about a couple months in, and I was able to enroll in Penn State's master's degree program. Due to already having a bachelor's degree, I was able to go straight into the master's program.
Excellent.
So, that was super beneficial. And, to be honest with you, I didn't have much free time. It was working 70 hours a week and trying to get the schoolwork done in between. And, honestly, it was a phenomenal experience, though, because we were utilizing all sorts of technology, whether it's products, fertilizers, newest innovations. At that time, moisture meters were still relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a really good experience to be working at Kinlock and to be going through that program. And part of why it was such a good experience is, I had Trevor to talk to things about. When I started, Adam Miller was still there.
Yep.
Dusty, who was there.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I was able to, if I didn't understand something or didn't understand what they were talking about, they were able to help me relate it to, what we're doing, in the field. And, it was just a phenomenal experience, going through that while working at Kinlock. And the best thing about the program for me was kind of my final little project. It was supposed to be scientific, and I probably veered away from, what some people might consider super scientific. But what I did is I made a list of about 10 to 12 questions that, my project was managing highly maintained bank grass in the mid-Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what I did is I took about, I think it was 10 to 12 questions or topics. And I went to really good turf managers in the mid-Atlantic, and I asked them the same exact question. I visited most of the properties while I was doing it, just to kind of get a, hey, what is everything the same? Is everything different? And, everywhere I went, we're putting out great products. But
now, can you rattle off some of those places? Just a couple.
So I went up to Woodmont. I talked to Pete. I talked to Scott Furlong. I actually didn't make it up there. I went to Kingsmill at the time when Chad Agcock was there. I went back to Spring Creek to talk to Brian Mansell, who was still there at the time. Obviously, I talked with Trevor, having him in my back door. I'm trying to think. There are a couple other ones, but then I also talked with Steve McDonald and Eric Irvin about the same exact questions to kind of get scientific side of things. And my biggest takeaway from it is, one, everyone's property is uniquely different. So it's not apples to apples when you're going up to DC and then you're going to, Charlottesville, Virginia. And obviously there's different soils, there's different profiles, but, there were a lot of commonalities. And, on top of that, as much as I was looking for, great, great things about growing bank grass and what people are doing with it, I was looking to network more than anything.
Sure. What a smart guy.
Yeah. And, I knew a lot of those guys before, but, haven't sat down for 2 hours, went and looked at their grass, their turf, there's, profiles, and, had, basically everyone explained their philosophy on managing turf to me. And it was very interesting. You had places that were managing greens, expectations of 13, others were closer to 11. And, we actually had a tough summer when I was doing the project. It was 2016. It's pretty hot, moisture wasn't completely under our control. So it was interesting to see also, the places that had higher green speed expectations, how they handled the summer compared to, the courses that were not quite as intense. So
excellent. Well, so go ahead, Stephen. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so spent a little over 3 years at Kinlock. And, one thing I was going to mention too is, I came in to that role as a transition period. And, we had a lot to, to live up to because, Pete did a great job there. So we had, some shoes to fill. But we wanted to continue to get better. It wasn't, let's just, be the same old Kinlock. But, the ultimate goal was continue to get better. But, some of the takeaways that I had, from that early experiences, I went from feeling like I was starting to understand things to like, going and working with, the assistants that were there at the time for, 6 years, Adam and Dusty. Like, I really understood what it meant to be a good assistant after working with them. And definitely didn't really comprehend exactly what that meant.
Can you put that in a couple of words? What does it mean to be a good assistant?
So I think, ultimately it's knowing what the superintendent wants before he even knows what he wants. So really understanding that thought process and making, his life easier and smoother, just being on the same page as, the superintendent, but also, making things happen. We have, a property and an experience to produce, and, we need to make that happen. So it was, that communication with the superintendent, but then past that, making sure the team's getting it done, in a super efficient manner.
It sounds as though the assistant puts ideas into action.
Yes.
Well, excellent. So as everyone's heard in the intro, you are now the superintendent at Ballyhack Golf Club in Roanoke, Virginia. Is that right? Golf club? What do you guys call it?
Yeah, Ballyhack Golf Club.
Excellent. Yeah. So, and when did you get to Ballyhack?
So I came in the end of May 29th, 2017. It was a Labor Day Monday.
Memorial Day Monday.
Yeah, Memorial Day Monday. Sorry.
That's kind of an odd time to start a superintendent's job.
Yeah, it was a unique situation. Obviously, going into summer is not ideal. There's some ownership transitions at the time, and the growing superintendent, Billy Bobbitt, who's another Kinlock guy.
Yes.
He was there, did a great job. He grew the place in, and was there for 9 years. So I came up. I spent a little time with him. Spent some time with the ownership. At that time, the golf course was built in a very poor time.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
built. It opened in 2009. Construction started 2007. So obviously, housing market crisis.
The height of the bubble. The worst time to open a golf course.
Yeah. So basically, the club was built properly, and then the resources were lacking for a while. And Billy did a phenomenal job managing the place through construction. Looking at the property, I can only imagine the challenges of growing the place in.
It's an absolutely stunning piece of property. Just beautiful. A beautiful links course in Southwest Virginia. That's really, there's no other way to put it. It is breathtaking. But now you work for the Dormie Network. Was that the transition of ownership? Have you always worked for the Dormie Network?
So when I came in, we had the owners of the Dormie Network, but the Dormie Network was not yet a thing.
Okay.
So we were the second club that they acquired. So, they purchased Arbor Links in Nebraska, and we were number 2. So at that point, they had the vision, but they didn't have the clubs. They didn't have the, really set up to market it as what it is now.
Well, let's talk a minute about what is the vision and what is the marketing, and really kind of what is the mission statement of both the Dormie Network as it applies to Ballyhack Golf Club.
So Dormie Network is a group of national golf clubs. So now we're at 6 national golf clubs. It's Arbor Links was the first one in Nebraska City, Nebraska. We were second. Third was Briggs Ranch near San Antonio, Texas. Then the Dormie Club in Pinehurst. Victoria National in Indiana was after that, and Hidden Creek in your neck of the woods in New Jersey.
That's right.
So those were all acquired in that order. And so the ultimate, to make it kind of short, is there's on-site housing at all these clubs. So you come, you travel in, and you stay, you play golf, you eat good food. You have a golf cart at your cottage. You wake up in the morning, hop in the golf cart, go eat breakfast, go play some good golf. It's not uncommon for, 36 holes in a day, or, 54 holes in a 3-day, golf trip.
And I had this experience a couple years ago. Remember, Eric Spurlock and Kevin Conley and Landscape Supply hosted a really nice meeting at your club. I stayed in the bungalow, the cottage, and it was so nice. It's really cool. You roll up your golf cart, and the facilities are just beautiful, very comfortable. Yeah, really, really cool experience. Um, so okay, so that's now ultimately what it's become. But when you got there, it wasn't like that. Uh, and and like you said, there really wasn't the funds to kind of maintain what is a breathtaking property, but also a difficult property. So when you got there, there was some work to do.
Absolutely.
So fill us in about kind of your initial take on the golf course and some of the things that you highlighted as things that you needed to fix.
All right. So, coming in, new ownership, there were some challenges where they lost a lot of the staff. So first things first, I had to rebuild a team coming in. I had, an assistant that was here for about a year and a half, a mechanic that was in for a couple of years. And then past that, everyone else was new hires.
Wow.
So, starting May 29th, and we have the Virginia State Open on, July, the third week of July. It's always British Open week. So we had about 45 days to kind of get things together and then host this tournament. And you have to remember with this tournament, I grew up in Virginia, so I've worked with many of the professionals and amateurs playing. So for me, I looked at it as a major challenge, but I thought if I could get through this summer, I could probably figure out how to handle, anything that lies ahead. So for us, the biggest challenge to start with was staffing in place properly. So, in hindsight, would have done a few things differently, but we were basically hiring anyone and everyone willing to work that, could physically work, and, found some really good people and had some, have some interesting stories that I might tell you separately about, people on staff. Or some experiences I had from that process. But, it was the middle of the golf season too. It was, it wasn't like we had, the spring to selectively interview. So the biggest thing we had to do was, fill the staff, adequately to, produce, start producing, good experience. Past that, the course it was under maintained due to resources, but what the absolute essentials were being done. Greens aerifications were happening, fairways were happening about once a year. Fertility was decent, but the soils are really bad. So we've kind of expedited working on those. But a lot of stuff was training and details and stuff like that. And then the long-term stuff, a lot more aggressive cultivations now, especially to the fairways. The natives were seeded to fine fescue little blue stem originally.
Okay.
And lack of resources, where are you going to cut from? You're not going to cut from the tees or the fairways or the greens. You're going to cut from bunkers, and you're going to cut from natives, on a property like ours.
Yes.
So one thing was to start trying to get the natives moderately playable. And when I say that, the ultimate goal for our natives is, if you hit it 20 feet in, you can at least hopefully find it and hack it back into the fairway.
Okay.
They were at the point, you might as well not look for your golf ball. So, that's still a process, but we're making some headway on that. But really initially, the first things that you have to do is you have to build a team, and you have to build a culture. It was really difficult to start with. I had to leave here and just, every day I had to look at, how are we getting better? The saying, 1% better every day or something like that, it wasn't going to happen overnight. So it was about building the culture. we went through a stretch, it was tough for me, but I said, we're triplexing greens before we're putting up with people coming in late.
There you go.
So, we went through a stretch where we had to do that, which is fine. But, ultimately I'm glad that we're, back to doing things like walk mowing greens and such. And, we set that culture and we set the high expectations for the staff. And it was tough to get people to adapt to it, but now our team culture is, really, really strong. And, that's probably one of the biggest things I would advise somebody going into a similar situation is, don't sacrifice the culture that you want for, conditions even, because ultimately you need to develop that culture.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Conditions will come, but they only come from the crew, from you guys, right? I know in this time, you've also built a new maintenance facility. Is that right?
Yeah. So, we come in, talk about everything that needs to be done, but this is what, I'm coming into from a maintenance perspective. Trailer for an office, old barn is the mechanic's bay, no running water, no heat. My old mechanic would joke that he had a skylight, which, was a hole in the roof that, you get rainwater through. And, he actually, and he was allowed to not be in there when it was windy, but it was very run down, and we were much in need of, the maintenance building that we're in now, and new equipment package, many of things. But I mean, they were still running the operation 8-9 years after the golf course opened, in the same fashion as during growing equipment sitting outside.
Yes.
So the network invested in a maintenance facility that's phenomenal. So we went from, about as bad as it gets to about as good as it gets.
That's wonderful. And that goes a long way for building culture as well.
Yeah, it's nice to, have a nice area to eat, lunch, and, a real bathroom to use. And,
That's right. That's
coming in and having your seat dry is something you don't think about when you don't have your, utility vehicles parked, in a building. So
that's exactly right. Well, that's very cool. It's very important, and like I said, it's just really cool that you identified that right away as the primary thing to fix, to get right. So, but you mentioned in this about turf type and about soil type, and I know that you and I've had a lot of discussions about both of those things. Now, Ballyhack is all the short grass is bent grass, right?
yes.
And you mentioned an aggressive bent grass. What is the cultivar?
So we're 007 on fairways and tees, and we're tie on greens.
Okay. Now, big biomass producers.
Yes.
Yeah. And on top of, now they're constructed sand root zones on greens, but the native soil is hard pan Piedmont clay, right? It is the mountain sort of clay.
Yeah, it's I would kind of describe it as potting clay with rocks in it.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
Yeah.
so not easy.
No, not a good medium to grow ideal bent grass in. But what I will say is that, bent grass it's impressive how well it grows in these soils. And we've done some things, to improve them, whether it's organically or, we're deep tining, doing some top dressing now. So we've done a lot of things to improve them, but it's pretty impressive, some of the newer cultivars, how aggressive they are. And, there's some struggles.
It will grow. It will grow well in soil, but if you're not doing those cultivations and growing things the right way, you could very easily have a thatch layer of where the roots are living on top of concrete hard pan. It could be that if you're not doing things the right way. but I know you are doing things the right way. So let's talk about that. What are some of these practices that you do in this native soil to get the bent grass to actually grow down into it and kind of humify, build a topsoil?
So the first year I was here, we actually aerified, all 42 acres of fairways because we were thatchy. At the time, we didn't have an aggressive verticutter, but over the winter, we went through with these 1 inch, 1 inch coring tines, 1 inch inside diameter, about as big of a coring tine as you could possibly get.
Wow.
And we just did it through the winter. And, if we had a nice day that was, made actually picking up cores easy, we would go out, we'd do it. We had, one aerifier, one sweeper, and we were going through. I mean, I bet you those holes and the spacing we were going, we probably removed 15% in that one aerification.
Wow.
And, so that's how we started. And, I won't ever do that again. As much material as we removed, it did take a while to grow back in. But from there, after we started receiving some equipment, we actually share some equipment with other network properties. So now twice a year, we're deep tining fairways, either core or solid tine on fairways, depending on weather conditions. And then we're doing an aggressive verticut. On top of that, we're top dressing. We're trying to make sure we get the sand into the holes and, create that porosity in the holes and not just build a layer of sand.
Yes.
So we're doing that, pretty aggressive cultivation practices. And, we're timing them with, good fertility. We're using, this, but we're using 5-4-5.
That's right.
In the, around that Halloween time frame, which is a little bit ahead of our late fall cultivation. And I think that's helped tremendously. Using C3 a lot. I really think the C3 is helping us get our soils kicked into gear in the early spring without, applying a lot of nitrogen. I think it's, we're utilizing what we have in the soils built up.
100%, 100%. And it's that consistently turning over and humifying into that clay root zone. Really cool. So let's see. So that's kind of some of the practices that you do out there. I know something that you also do is you are impactful with the particular areas of the golf course that see more compaction, that see more mechanical damage. You really focus in on those other areas, whether they are fairway, rough, surrounds. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, last year's a challenging year for everyone with cart traffic. Rounds are up, and then the single rider cart traffic. Us in particular, well, we're not the only ones, but we don't have continuous cart pass, and
Right.
we also have a scenario with the on-site housing where people are here and they're here to play golf. So you get 2 inches of rain, they want to go play golf.
Sure.
And we try not to, we try to allow them out there. So, last year we, saw a very significant uptick in rounds, but more than that, we probably doubled our cart traffic. And, we don't have continuous cart pass. So on top of that, we had 65 inches of rain last year. So last year was we had good conditions with the exception of our, our entrances, exits, and then, pinch points of the golf course, whether it's around a bunker or, whatever that was. And, we started doing some stuff last year during the summer. We didn't know what was going to come. We couldn't prepare for it. But, we were a little bit reactive, using some products reactively.
Mm-hmm.
But, this off season, I'm like, all right, we need to do something differently. So we started aerifying the heavy traffic areas more. We started incorporating Renovate Plus. And then even once the season hit, May and June, we aerified our heavy trafficked areas, for the second and third time, this, in a spring.
Wow.
Because, typically what we see is as we see that wear, as it's wearing down, what you see is that's left is where you verify.
That's right.
So we're like, well, let's aerify more, and we'll have, you know, hopefully more will make it through it. Obviously, you're relieving compaction, and I think there's some other stuff going on with those holes, whether the crown's a little bit lower or whatever's happening. But where you're seeing a lot more success in those aeration holes, so we're like, well, let's make more. So we did that, at good growing points of the year when, bent grass wants to grow. So May and, early June. And with that, incorporated some Renovate Plus, and, we've done we've done a little bit more fertility there, granular fertility. But, you and I have talked that we have a separate spray program for the heavy traffic areas.
I love that. I love that. It's easy to think about traffic areas and compaction. So your first thought, and it is important, the aerification and that sort of approach. But you're making an impactful difference with a separate spray tank, a separate spray for those areas, which, and again, you can't really aerify when it's 100 degrees in July and August, but you can get out there with the tank. And so tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we'll spray about 6 acres on top of our, other sprays.
Right.
And, what we're doing is we're spraying, typically it's C3. It's a slow release urea, about 1/10 of a pound of nitrogen. We're using silica, and we're using a phosphite with a pigment. So one thing we're seeing in these areas too, if they do get thin, they get hotter from the sun baking down on them.
Sure.
So, we think the pigment's helping, but the C3s, I've always seen good success from using that in those areas. And obviously the nitrogen self-explanatory.
Sure.
Silica is probably helping a little bit, while we're doing it, we add that.
Yeah, everything you're doing is strengthening the plant in those areas. Yeah, and like you said, when you have a denser canopy, it inherently protects itself more. Yeah, so that's very cool. And I mean, what I think is most cool about it is that you isolate down the particular areas that need more help, and that's an impactful way to manage your property. It can be very overwhelming if you think about 42 acres of fairways, but if you think about, okay, and then plus probably another 40 acres of rough, if you think, okay, well, there's actually 6 acres here that need some extra help, now it's manageable. You do some other really kind of cool and interesting stuff that I would say is scary to some people. You told me some kind of crazy low mowing numbers with Wileys that when you're really trying to dial it in for, say, tournament time.
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in keeping the plant regulated, never letting it bounce out of that.
Okay.
So we talk about these low heights of cut, but when we're talking about this, we'll keep it in perspective a little bit that Ballyhack greens have a lot of undulation. So 11 on the stimp meter is plenty quick for Ballyhack.
Sure.
So ultimately, my goal is to be happy with the green speeds for Ballyhack with a single cut.
Excellent.
So what we've got to is, trying to stay on Wiley rollers all year, which we've actually bailed from the last 2 summers, but, we have done it in the past and had success. But we're not doing much grooming past that. So we're not, laying the plant over a lot, but, being that the Wileys are out front, we're clipping it tight. And, so high growth regulation rates, low height of cut. We are rolling some, but most of the time we're not mowing on those days that we roll. And then we're at a very low height of cut, but we're regulated heavily. And the newer bent grasses are so dense that I just don't think that, 090 is the same on a super dense bent grass as it is, older variety.
On Pencross or something.
Yeah, there's so many plants and so much, so much leafy area. And if that's strong, I think it's actually holding the mower up higher. So I think, these super dense bent grasses, you can get lower than what's traditionally accepted as far as a bench height of cut.
That's true. And you don't, because you don't have that laying down of a leaf blade, you're not as big of a risk of damaging the leaf blade because you have more upright growth. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Plus, as you said, you're not mowing every day. You're not mowing on those days that you're rolling. So you are keeping that mechanical stress low for the plant.
Yes. A lot of this started with, not having the resources my first year or two with, trying to fill labor roles. I'm like, well, let's bump up the growth regulator rates just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually did some trials on our nursery where we would double spray areas and, kind of evaluate how they'd react to the products. And, we weren't really seeing any, harm to the plant from, heavier regulation, which I think it's the type of bent grass. I don't necessarily suggest that people go out and, double their growth regulator rates, but I do think, some of these newer bents, it's not apples to apples when you talk about, inputs.
Sure.
And I do think the newer bent grasses, the rates are a little bit higher, but we tweak those up, to the point that, we might skip a mowing. And I mean, this is even when the grass wants to grow hard. We might skip a mowing and just roll, and we don't, lose any green speed. We do think we're helping with the mechanical stress. We are helping with the mechanical stress, and it works for us. It works for our property. Every property is different, but for, reaching the target green speeds we're trying to get to, the kind of low height of cut, good fertility program, high growth regulation rates, and kind of, rotating between, cutting and rolling. It's helping mechanically. It's helping, with our labor resources. They're pretty consistent, from that one day to the next when we're doing that as far as green speeds. And, one of the biggest things that I think I'm seeing is, the rooting that we're seeing by, limiting that top growth through growth regulators, but also limiting the mechanical stress. We're seeing, really, really good rooting. Even, this August, which this year's been, not one of the harder, summers that we've had, but we're seeing some really good rooting. And I think a lot of it's tied to, kind of how we're managing things.
Tell me about root depths, because you've mentioned it both on greens, but also out into that native soil where you're consistent with the C3. You've got great depth, right?
Yeah, it's pretty common for us to cut a cup and get, a few roots through the bottom. Even, this August, we're seeing some, which, makes you feel good. Like everything's kind of coming together, including the weather. The weather's right. Probably the biggest factor in, that success. But, a lot of other good things are happening. But even in the fairways, we've, it's going to take a while to deeply amend these heavy clay soils, but we're deep tining, and with this heavy potting clay we're growing in, the deep tine channels don't go away. You can cut a piece of sod 4 months after you deep tine, you can still find these channels, and we're seeing the roots diving as deep as we can go, which is only here it's only 6 inches at the moment because we're hitting so many rocks and boulders from the it's native soil, and we're in foothills in the mountains.
So that's really interesting, man. I mean, one other thing I just want to get out there, because I know we've talked about it before, is that you do manage this bent grass, and particularly on greens, a little bit differently in the shoulder seasons, more spring and fall, than you do in the summertime. a lot of, you say you pull a lot of fertility out, but you really do focus in on some of the biologicals in the spring and fall, particularly the Myco 333 and BioVantage, the Earthworks liquid with the Bacillus package. But you really try and make the most of those applications in the spring and fall. Is that right?
Yeah, so the granulars, we're using 333 Myco, and we're using the Renov 8 Plus, and I really think that's a staple to starting to push these roots. It's the aggressive cultivations, and then supplying the things that you need to get the soils going. So that program's been used for forever with guys I've worked with.
Mm-hmm.
And we really see it. We go early in March with the cultivation, which is earlier than most.
Okay.
And I really think at that March, April timeframe, you supply everything it needs. You're going to have primarily root growth. You might have some slow healing from a cultivation, but I really think going early, you are growing roots extensively in those 2 months.
Absolutely.
And where if you go a little bit later in this area, there's successful guys that do it multiple ways. But I just don't know that you're producing the rooting, once you get closer to June and roots don't want to push.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to get out early and do it. And I do think, we're seeing a lot of success from a rooting standpoint. But we also do it, our business model of the club with people traveling in, hopefully by Masters Week, we're about, it's springtime. We're ready to rock and roll.
You're full tilt. That's right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, and tell me a little bit more about the BioVantage. You something that I see with it, and I hear a lot about, is increased stand density. Really, you're really able to get a very dense leaf stand. The plant seems to be tillering more and providing a great roll. Is that something you see?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll use it, around those cultivation times, get things going. We definitely think it helps, set us off on a good foot for the season. So yeah, what you said, absolutely agree with. Using some BioVantage, using some C3 across the board, and definitely, helping above and below ground with those products.
Oh, that's great, man. That's great. Yeah. So in this, so I'm so happy that you got on here. This was a really cool chat. We got to talk about your work transitioning from, basically, it sounds like across that 64 corridor, right, into Richmond, back out to Roanoke. I know that all in this time as well, you've gotten married. Your wife is a school teacher in Roanoke. Is that right?
Yes, she's a school teacher and she coaches girls lacrosse. So she's, this upcoming year will be her 3rd year in Roanoke and 3rd year coaching lacrosse. And she's a trooper. When I first came out here, she was actually still in Richmond, but she'd come down and we'd come work, evenings, and she can actually cut cups, and she doesn't like to, but she can. So she used to come and, she'd take the flags out for me. We'd spray on the Sunday night. And she, now she's made some friends down here since she moved, and she doesn't come out, as frequently, but, yeah, she's great. She's,
well, it's really cool. It sounds like the both of you, well, I know are kind of are stalwarts in this community, because she's a teacher and coach in Roanoke. You run this wonderful golf club in the area, well known and premier, and I'm really happy for you. It's this was a great chat too, Stephen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, buddy. See ya.
Yeah.